Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency and Money Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I'm Tony Guerra, pharmacist and publisher, bringing you help succeeding in your career, health, and wealth before, during, and after residency. You can sign up for the email list at pharmacyresidencypodcast.com to get your free LOI template or get editing help working one-on-one with me at residency.teachable.com. So, reducing taxes, kind of maintaining your wealth. That's number 7. And when it comes to the financial advisor, I've talked to some financial advisors that are pretty well schooled in tax and some that are just literally just saying, well, we've got an accountant for that. What do you do, or what do you recommend in terms of getting your tax house in order?
Well, first is to kind of learn how taxes work. There's a lot of ignorance on this topic. You know, I had something on the WCI forum the other day. It was somebody who'd done really well in their business. They'd gotten a business, some sort of healthcare associated business that was paying like $2 million. And his first question is, how can I pay less in taxes? And I'm like, the reason you're paying a lot in taxes is because you're making a lot of money. This is a good thing. The question is not how to pay less in taxes. It's how to have more left after paying taxes. And you're killing it at that, you know? So it's just the realization that there's not like these tax tricks out there that you just don't know about.
Okay.
The way you reduce your tax bill is by living your financial life differently, you know, paying for healthcare, saving for retirement, sending your kids to college, getting married, you know, if the other spouse isn't working, having kids. These are the things that reduce your tax bill.
Okay.
You know, it's living your financial life differently. It's not, oh, I got the home office deduction this year because I filed it, you know, some special way. You know, those are little icing on the cake. The big things are the big things, and you got to pay attention to those when it comes to tax reduction.
So, white coat investor, come to me with your uptown problems.
Well, that's exactly it, right? They're all first world problems that we talk about at the White Coat Investor, but for those who have them, they're real problems.
All right, finally, we're at mission 8, which is where we get something sexy here. What do we invest in? So, I don't know. We just take our time machine back in time and we go back to October and we say, "Gosh, NVIDIA looks good. I think we're going to go all in, and I'll quintuple my income, and then maybe I'll just get out in July." And so we dream about those things. But tell me a little bit about your way of doing it, and really more. The 3 words that kind of just didn't leave my mind when I listened to your book a second time was the goal of eliminating financial worry. And when you have enough of a plan and you have enough in those plans, I feel like that is a reasonable goal. So tell me a little bit about your kind of mindset on investing.
Sure. I think the best thing to do for investing is to make a written investing plan and follow it. 90% of the questions I see about investing can be answered by, what does your written investing plan say you should do? And because I don't have these questions every month. Every month I have to invest, because every month I make more money than I spend, and I have to invest it. Well, every month am I going to go and, what's the best stock to invest in this month? I'd spend my entire month researching stocks. Who wants to spend their life doing that? I'd rather be off climbing in the Tetons with my son, right, than doing that.
Yeah.
So what do I invest in? Well, exactly what my plan tells me to invest in. This plan I wrote as a resident 20 years ago. I'm still investing that way. Same boring mutual funds. Yeah, there's been a little change here and there to the plan over the years. But for the most part, I'm investing in the same crap I was investing in 2004.
Okay.
And it's just a question of how much money I put in there every month. And that's the difference between what I made and what I spent. And so I'm a big fan of having a written investing plan. Now, when you make your written investing plan, you need to learn a little bit about investing, and how it works, and what doesn't. And when you dive into the data, you will quickly learn that there are some things that do not work for most people. Maybe there's a tiny percentage of them for whom they work, but for most people, they do not work. These are things like picking stocks, like trying to time the market, like trying to pick winning actively managed mutual fund managers. These are things that the data is very clear don't work. So when it comes to investing in stocks, the data is pretty darn clear how almost all of us should invest. And that's to buy low-cost, broadly diversified index funds. And just stay the course with them. Buy and hold them. put more in there every month, always be buying. And guess what? After 10 or 20 years, you'll find out, hey, I'm rich. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is absolutely cool. All right, well, let's go from investing to, and you mentioned a couple of the financial mistakes maybe some people have made, like, oh, I thought I had it. I bought Amazon at 100 in 1999, and then I just sold it when it was at 5. I finally gave up on it. Just whatever nightmare story there is. But you talk a little bit more about other financial mistakes. So tell me a little bit about correcting financial mistakes, I guess it's more as a learning process, that this is just an ongoing process. Your recent episode talked about the difference between IRA and 401k and how that, we're going to have to put the Roth for the, I'm 51, so I get to put in that extra 7,500. And now the government says, well, we're going to kind of want taxes on some of that. But, that's the minutia. But what are some of the financial mistakes that you see and that people could correct right away? And then how they can kind of continue to educate themselves by listening to the show, because you're answer driven or question driven. Like, people go on the speak pipe, and I was like, I had that question. Somebody asked the question for me. Thanks.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Most people do not become financially literate from the very beginning, right? They go out there, they start working their career, they make a few mistakes, they do this, they do that. Something lights a spark, and they decide, I got to learn this stuff. I want to become financially literate. And so they do that after 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 years. And at that point, they realize, oh, this is what I should have been doing from the beginning. Well, I haven't been doing that. I've done a few things differently. And so chapter 9 in the book, mission 9, is to correct all those mistakes.
Okay.
And some of the common ones for doctors are doing things like buying whole life insurance. Almost no doctor needs whole life insurance. Right. But it gets sold to all kinds of them. And so they got to decide what to do with it. And if it's been a number of years, sometimes it makes sense to keep it. If it's just been a few years and it hurts, but oftentimes surrendering it after getting term life insurance in place is the right move. Or maybe they've been paying a financial advisor too much and getting bad advice, and they need to fire that advisor. Or maybe they've built up a portfolio of, individual stocks, and they got to figure out what to do with these legacy investments now. And so that's what chapter 9 is about, is just realizing that almost everyone makes mistakes. And that's okay, but you need to, take care of some of these big ones that are still impacting your financial life.
The saving for college, I didn't know if that was you. I don't think it was you, the physician, but whoever the physician was in there, we had this kind of 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, where it was 5,000 from the student themselves in summer, 5,000 from the student during the school year, 5,000 maybe from mom and dad, 5,000 from maybe a scholarship, and then 5,000 that they would get. But in there, it recommended state schools, or at least being mindful of the tuition if you're going to go to a private school. And then also that you should not be going into debt for it. And my wife and I's personal plan, we have our 3 houses we're going to have paid off, 2 are rentals, and we're only putting 50,000 for each daughter, or we're only expecting 50 or 60,000 for each daughter, whatever the market does. So we're not, we're kind of that mind. Like, if you go to, state school, all will be well. If you want to go somewhere different, that's going to be on you a bit. Can you tell me what your particular, thought is on school and being mindful of that?
Yeah, I think there's 4 pillars to paying for an undergraduate education. And the most important one, and the one that most people ignore, is school selection. Picking a school you can actually afford as a family is huge, right? I can't believe how many people pay 3 times, 4 times, 6 times as much as I'm paying for my daughter in tuition, right? There are less expensive schools out there, and you have to at least consider the value proposition you're getting here.
Yeah.
Particularly if you don't have the money, that's a much bigger issue. Okay. Other pillars besides choosing a school you can afford is the kids' contribution. Okay, the kids' savings, the kids working during the school year in a part-time job, the kids working during the summers in a full-time job, the kids' scholarships, those sorts of issues. Next is the parents' cash flow, right? It's not like the second your kid enrolls in college, you don't have any money coming in anymore. You can probably help with something, whatever you were paying for their car insurance at home or whatever you were paying to put food in their mouth. You can probably redirect some of that, maybe even a little bit more, toward college. And then, of course, parental savings. This is the typical 529 plan or maybe a Coverdell ESA plan that you saved up in advance. But a lot of people think paying for college is all about saving it up in advance, and it's not. The kid can contribute something. Most of us are professionals, and our kids are relatively bright, and they can get some sort of scholarship, and they can certainly work a little bit. Most of us work during college. Why do we think our kids can't? But none of those pillars is debt. Right. I think it's not reasonable at all for the child of a physician in particular, and maybe pharmacists as well, to borrow for their undergraduate education. Now they want to go to dental school, they want to go to pharmacy school. Well, they may end up having to borrow a little bit of money for that. But for undergraduate, I just think most of our kids ought to be able to get through, without debt, without student loans. But in the event that you are in that situation where the kid does need some student loans, let the kid borrow it. Don't be borrowing student loans for your kid. That's just dumb. So let the kid be the debtor.
The parent loan is absent, I think, from the SAVE plan. So
yeah, absolutely not in my plan. You mean this? You mean the SAVE?
Yeah, I mean the SAVE plan, not your SAVE plan.
I don't know if it is or not. I know the prior IDRs, you could get public service loan forgiveness for parental loans, but it's based on the parent's employment.
Oh, okay.
Employment. The parents got to work for a nonprofit.
Oh, maybe that's a way to go.
If you're in some sort of, maybe there's an in there, but as a general rule, I just think it's a bad idea to borrow for somebody else's education.
Okay. I am going to look into parent PSLF because I plan to be here a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just saw a statistic of how many people that are 65 plus still owe student loans. And it wasn't that high of a percentage that were their kids' loans. A lot of them were their own loans. So there's a lot of people still running around with student loans in their senior years.
Yeah, we're going to see October 1st. Well, I think it's going to take about 90 days. But October 1st, I think, is going to be a bit of a shock for a lot of people as they turn the loans back on. They say it's not going to affect the economy too much, just tiny portion of GDP. But I don't know, 40 million people. That's a lot of people that are not going to feel so good about it.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, they're already back on. They're already accumulating interest.
Oh,
just the payments don't start till October.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's monopoly money now. You're going to feel it a little bit later.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about passing on and avoiding probate, I guess I'm not as skilled in this. I do know that you can give, I think, like 17,000 per person, and there's some massive number that's way above our net worth that we would need to worry about, like in the millions. But tell me a little bit about passing assets on and how you can make it a little bit better for the kids or for the next, the next of kin.
Yeah, chapter 11 in the book is all about estate planning. And estate planning accomplishes three things. One, it makes sure the stuff you care about, whether it's your kids for minor children or your stuff and money, goes where you want it to go when you die. That's probably the most important aspect of estate planning. Two is to avoid probate. Can be expensive. It's a public process, can be time consuming. It varies by state. And step three is to avoid taxes that you wouldn't otherwise have to pay. What a lot of people don't realize, though, is there are no death taxes for almost everybody that dies, because they're just not wealthy enough. The exemption amount is so large these days. For a married couple, it's like 26 million right now you can pass on to your kids before you have to pay any sort of estate tax.
Okay.
But if you get into that situation, yeah, it's worthwhile doing some estate planning to try to minimize that hit.
But the kids,
but for most people, it's just not an issue.
Do the kids pay any taxes on it?
No.
Okay.
There are a few states with an inheritance tax.
Okay.
And there are a few states with an estate tax with a lower estate tax exemption than the federal one.
Okay.
And so it's all state specific information, but in most states, there are neither of those, and only the federal estate tax applies. And that's got a huge exemption right now. So even the gift tax limit, even if you go over that 17,000 a year that you can give anybody you want, you just start using up some of that exemption. You don't actually have to pay gift taxes until you've used up all 13 if you're single or 26 million if you're married.
Okay.
So it's just not an issue for most people. Most docs and most pharmacists just aren't wealthy enough to have to worry about estate taxes.
Yeah, I'm not in that part of Uptown. All right. Step 12, the lawsuits. Well, it's not as much of an issue for pharmacists. It's a lot more valuable to go after Purdue Pharma than it is to go after a single pharmacist, or maybe even they'd go after a CVS or a Walgreens or something like that. But again, you give some good advice here just to protect it. But tell us a little bit about lawsuits, even though it's a little bit more with the MDs.
Sure. Again, as I mentioned about the book at the beginning, this is something doctors worry about a lot. They shouldn't worry nearly as much as they do. But there are a few easy asset protection moves that people can do that are cheap, straightforward, very effective in the event that there was an above policy limits judgment that wasn't reduced on appeal. Things like maxing out your retirement accounts. In almost every state, they're completely protected from your creditors. You can declare bankruptcy and you still keep everything in your retirement accounts. Homestead exemptions in some states, you get to keep some percentage of your home equity or even the entire thing, depending on the state. How you title your property matters. In some states, you can title it tenants by the entirety with you and your spouse, and that keeps a creditor of only one of you from being able to take it away. And just being familiar with your state's asset protection laws is beneficial. In fact, that's about half of my asset protection book is just a list of the state asset protection laws.
Okay. All right. And then when you say retirement account, that means that, so if somebody has a Fidelity account, a Schwab account, a Vanguard account, they're going to have maybe half their account is an IRA, 401k. That can't be touched, but it's maybe the taxable account that they're putting money into that would be able to be attacked or touched.
That's right. That one's going to be available to your creditors.
Fantastic.
But the point is, max out that 401k because it isn't.
Okay. All right.
Max out that Roth IRA because it isn't. That's the point.
Okay. So I recommend that, my tribe gets, picks one of your 4 books, whichever one's more appropriate. I'm going to guess the first 3 are going to be the ones to start off. But most our listeners or watchers on YouTube, what do you think the best entry is for them to get into the White Coat Investor? You actually provide the 12 steps, if I remember right, as kind of a benefit of joining the email list or the podcast list.
Yeah, it's not nearly as detailed as the book is. The book's got a lot more detail in it. But yeah, we will send you 12 emails when you sign up for our newsletter. They are totally free and they will walk you through these steps. If you need more information, you can go spend your 15 or 20 bucks on a book and it'll help you and give you some additional information, but that's all pretty darn cheap as far as, compared to what you'd pay a financial advisor.
Okay. All right. Well, I've asked you a lot of questions. Is there anything else that you would want to say that maybe I haven't asked you about?
Well, I just want to give a big shout out to your listeners, right? They're doing a hard job. They spent a long time learning how to do it. They've gotten a lot of education and training, and somebody ought to tell them thank you for what they're doing. So if they haven't heard that from anybody today, let me tell them thanks for what they're doing. And remember that your income, for most of us, your income is your greatest wealth building tool. Okay. So take care of it, boost it, carve out as much of it as you can, and use it to build wealth. Okay. Well, thanks for being on the Pharmacy Residency Podcast. Thanks for having me. This has been the Pharmacy Residency and Money Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. You might want to check out our available residency audiobooks at pharmacyresidencypodcast.com/books, or you can get your first book free if you've never been on Audible before. You can work one-on-one with me to get a better residency that will better suit your career, health, and wealth at residency.teachable.com. Feel free to send an invite to Tony PharmD on LinkedIn or email me at tonythepharmacist@gmail.com. Music was by Policy.